When you're a hardcore anime fan for any lengthy period of time, there are some uncomfortable conversations you end up having with people who aren't as enamored by colourful Asian drawings as you are. Conversations like, why does every anime girl have huge tits? Why are there so many sexualized kids? Why aren't there any people of colour in anime? And one that's very much related to that last one, isn't anime made in Japan? Why do all the characters look so white? Hello and welcome to Anime Editorial. I'm your host Nino, and today I'm going to break down for you why your average anime character looks the way that they do. I've been sitting on this idea for quite some time, but what spurred me on to writing this video was some comments hip-hop luminary Talib Kweli made in a Vlad TV interview.
So you had some interesting comments about Japan, white supremacy, and how anime ties into that.
Okay.
I thought that was really interesting.
Okay.
The way you had explained it was that Japanese anime looks like white people as opposed to Japanese people?
Mm-hmm.
Explain
I mean,
that.
it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I grew up watching old school anime like Fist of North Star and Wind Ninja Chronicles and all those old school anime joints. Shout out to Supernatural. I used to go over his house and watch all them joints. But I noticed back then, there's certain things I noticed back then that a majority of the characters had Eurocentric features. There was a lot of whitewashing in terms of the blue eyes and blonde hair, and the heroes looked more European, and some of the villains looked Asiatic, African, or Asian. That's just something I noticed.
Now, I love Talib. I think rap music wouldn't be what it is today without his contributions. However, I have to call 17 directions of BS on that little diatribe. Firstly, what Talib is alluding to is that there's some kind of inherent racial bias that Japan has towards making lighter skinned people the heroes and making darker skinned people the villains. And while I'm not here to say what racial issues Japan does or doesn't have, what I can talk about is anime, and as far as anime goes, Talib is way off base. Anime is a medium of escapism. There are plenty of shows that have no intention of being escapist fantasy. However, if we're being perfectly honest, it's clear to see that escapism is a large part of anime as an art form. Anime is also fueled by otaku culture, and if there's one thing otaku aren't thinking of when it comes to their character designs, it's whether or not the characters look white enough to be heroes or not. In all honesty though, the reason why this is such a confusing and touchy thing to deal with is that I'm approaching this as an outsider looking in and trying to pass together an explanation. However, because I'm smarter than your average bear and actually know a thing or two about design theory, I can do my best to break it down for you. So now let's talk art. There are two schools of thought in design, abstract and non-objective. In art, when you're aiming for abstraction, you're usually taking something that exists in the real world and either simplifying it, distorting it, or just messing with it in a general sense to get a new and interesting design. Cartooning and character design has always used some level of abstraction to give their characters unique appearances. When you look at any cartoon, it's usually clear that the artists are taking facial features, body types, and just general attributes you'd see in the regular world and exaggerating them for the purpose of their own aesthetic. Let me hit you with a curveball. Anime characters are white, right? Then, may I ask, what race is Homer Simpson? See, that's a perfect example of abstraction. In The Simpsons, we see right off the bat that the show's abstraction for Caucasian skin is the color yellow. However, we see that this abstraction is not universal because minorities like Apu and Carl are still colored like their races would imply. This, along with the facial features and hairstyles that The Simpsons uses, forms the basis for its abstraction of the human form. Anime uses abstraction as well, however, it really fluctuates from show to show. Some shows use designs that are more or less just slightly stylized reality. Other shows go in various different directions. However, anime makes use of that other theory in design as well. Non-objective is defined as any design representing or intended to represent no natural or actual object, figure, or scene. If abstract is coming up with something by tweaking and manipulating the natural world, non-objective is coming up with something while ignoring the natural altogether. In my opinion, a lot of designs in anime are contextually non-objective, and this aspect is what leads to people getting confused over the races of the characters. There is a kind of mix of abstraction and non-objective design happening all at once with anime characters, and the artists behind these shows know this. They're doing it intentionally. In fact, there's an entire word for this exact concept. Mokokuseki is a term that roughly translates to statelessness or without nationality. It is a generally codified term to explain the design sensibilities of Japanese animation. Why is it that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl can be named Tsukino Usagi? Because the creator said so, silly. She's in Japan, she was born there, she goes to Japanese high school, she obviously speaks Japanese, otherwise why would you need subtitles to understand her? Jokes aside, this really is just a byproduct of Mokokuseki. It's the equivalent of I don't see race for character design. Japanese people know they live on an island where most of the people are the same race, and a lot of Japanese creators know how boring a TV show containing only people who look like real-life Japanese people would look. Obviously, there are some of you who might not think that it would look that boring, but I'm saying it would be boring for them, not boring for you. Again, the designs for anime characters are non-objective. They're not trying to be what humans look like in the natural world. They exist in a stateless limbo where characters can have whatever hair color, skin tone, and nationality the character designer chooses. Also, for the record, just in case people, especially any of my viewers who are of African descent like I am, have this idea that Japan has some kind of bias towards countries like America and the United Kingdom, have you actually seen anime where America plays a prominent role? They're usually trying to intervene with the story with conventional military opposition only to get blown the fuck out. They also often come across as barbaric, militaristic assholes out to cockblock Japan. Hell, the entire point of shows like Code Geass and Gate is to show how evil Europeans and Americans are while painting Japan as an almighty benevolent hero. However, I will say there is a reason why a lot of people have this idea of Japan being super racist in their depictions of minorities. And while the history is way more complex than I'm going to make it sound, the short version is that back in the 50s, when folks like Tezuka were taking their cues from Western animation houses like Disney, they were more or less just copying all the abstractions that they used in their character designs. So sure, you had your characters who kind of looked like Betty Boop and Snow White, but for the darker skinned folk, you were still seeing the minstrel-like caricatures of African Americans that you'd probably have seen in movies like Song of the South or those really uncomfortable Warner Brothers cartoons. Those caricatures didn't go away for a very long time, mainly because Japan legitimately thought that that was the universally acceptable abstraction for black people in animation, an abstraction that anime carried with it all the way into the 21st century. They're starting to fix up nowadays though, God bless Michiko to Hatchin. Now, with all this being said, there really isn't even a shortage of anime characters that look outright Japanese. Plenty of shows in any given season have characters with fairly realistic designs, where the characters are clearly intended to look Asian, and when this is the case, it's kind of an instant signifier that the show is to be taken more seriously than your average anime. Shows like Joker Game, Paranoia Agent, and even the movie Akira are examples of a sort of rejection of Mokokuseki and wanting to buck the anime trend. Designing characters in anime almost always comes down to how marketable they are. The various hair colors, the various skin tones, the clothing styles are all done for one purpose: to sell the fantasy that the anime is trying to express to the viewer, and to give the otaku a reason to add these new characters to their collection. So are anime characters white? Unless the story says so, then no. Sayonara minasan, thanks for watching.